Welcome back. So in this video, what I want to deal with is handling when my player falls off of a platform. So right now, let me zoom out of this a little bit. When my player down here runs off the platform and falls, she just falls and falls and falls forever. So what I want to do instead is when she falls and falls off the screen, I then want to reset her back to her starting spot. So it's just like dropping them back in sort of into the game. You can think of more complicated things to do with this, but the idea here is just to sort of reset the game once the player sort of falls and dies or exits the scene or whatever. All right, so to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little thing down here below the scene that won't be seen by the person playing the game. But I want to build it so that when my player gets to a certain point, then I know that they have fallen off the screen. So this is a sort of like a little collision line. So let me do that. So I'm going to create a new 2D object, and I'm going to just choose a square, and there it is. And let me zoom in so that I can manipulate it a little. So first I'm going to move it down here below the screen, and I want it to stick out a little further like there, and then let's resize it, and I'm too far away. There we go to get the squares. So let's draw it across and then pull this thing. All right, there. So far enough out so if my player jumps off the end, we should be good to go. So you'll notice all I have here is a transform and a sprite renderer around this square that you see here. And the square the color doesn't matter anyways. Really, I just want to know that I've hit it. So to allow it to be hit, I'm going to add a box collider 2D on it. Great. So that knows that when the player hits it, I can generate a collision, and then I can know about that collision. All right, so I'm going to rename this thing from a square, and let's call it the fall check. So this is checking to see if a fall has happened. So right now what happens is if I fall, the player should fall. Let me pull this over so we can see it in the scene. There we go. So if the player, whoops, let me run it again. If the player goes down here and falls, they'll get stuck right there. But really what I want to happen is to notice the collision with this device and then bring the player back up. There's a couple things I need to do. One is I need to know where the player started so that I can return the player to that position. And you can also use this sort of concept to do checkpointing. So maybe along your platform you have a new checkpoint, and that's where the player starts back once they pass that checkpoint. Right now I'm just going to start back at the beginning. And I need to be able to add code to be able to say, oh, this thing happened, so reset. So I'm going to add a couple scripts to my scripts folder to be able to do this. So new C# script, and I'm going to start with something called the game manager. So as you might guess, it manages the game, and its job is going to be to know where the player starts and to reset the player to that position. Then I'm going to also add another script on top of my player, you'll see shortly, called the player manager. And the player manager's job is, as you might guess, to know that the player fell or something happened to the player and that we need to reset, essentially call the game management and have the game management reset stuff. So let me open up the game manager here. So it starts off empty as always. But I need some things here. So up here in my instance variable area, I'm going to create a serialized field. There we go. Serialized field, private, game, object. We'll call this the player. So this is going to be the player itself. And then let me also create a private. So this is not seen by anybody else. Vector 3, and this is going to be the player start point. So this is going to be the location where the player starts. So when this game manager is called at the very beginning of the game, the only thing I want it to do is to figure out where the player is. Since we have a reference to the player game object, or hopefully we'll have a reference, then I can just save the position into this vector3 player start point. Okay, not going to do any updating, at least for now, but I am going to create a public void function called restart game, which job is to restart the game. Now I want to do this with a little bit of timing, so to allow for the timing I'm going to create a coroutine. So let me create a private IE enumerator. We've done this before, called restart game co for the coroutine. And then it's going to do a yield return. This is to do the pause, new, wait 4 seconds. And then I'm going to wait for half a second before the player, this is the actual player, gets in its old position back. So notice what this is going to do is move the player. So the job of the game manager is to remember where the player is at the beginning, and then whenever restart game is going to be called, we're going to move the player back to that position. So inside a restart game, I'm going to start the coroutine, and the coroutine is called restart game co. There we go. So this will call this restart game coroutine. All right. So that is the game manager, and as you might guess, we're going to have to do some work as well with the player. So this is the player manager, and the player manager is going to need the game manager, because the player manager is the one that's going to actually call restart game. So serialized field, private. You could say public here as well. That's fine. I'm using serialized field, the game manager, and we'll call this game manager. So this is saying give me the game manager so that I can call this function. So I'm going to create a private void on collision enter 2D. So I notice that a collision has happened. And if that collision dot game object, and I'm going to use something called the tag. And the reason I want to use the tag and not name here, we've used name before, is that I later may want to allow other things to cause the game to restart. So this tag allows me to tag multiple things as an object that if I hit, for example, an enemy, if I hit an enemy, maybe I restart the game as well. But here, so I need to come up with a tag that works here. So I'm going to call this the death box. And essentially, this is something that happens, or we could call this, tag it with player death. How about player restart? We'll start with that one. You can come up with whatever name you want to use there. So I need to tag things as player restart if I want the player to restart. So if that is true, then we're going to call the game manager's function called restart game, and it's going to call the coroutine for us. All right, so we got to do a little bit of setting up here. First of all, my fall check, I need to tag it, because if I collide with it, I need this tag to work. And right now, I don't have anything, so I'm going to add a tag. So let's add, and I think I said player restart. So let's save that. So back to my fall check. And I'm going to choose tag it with player restart. You can actually tag things with multiple items, multiple tags, but I'm going to start with that. Okay, so there's player restart, so that if statement will work. Okay, a few things. The player manager needs to be attached to the player. There. Let me make sure that happened. There's the player manager. Notice it needs the game manager, which I don't have one yet. So let me go, I have code, but I don't have an object yet. So let's create an empty object called the game manager. As you might guess, this may do more things than what it's doing now. And I'm going to attach this script to this object. So if I choose it, we're there. Notice it needs to know the player. So let's pull the player over and attach that to the game manager. And as you might guess, now in the player, which needs the game manager, we can pull this object over and attach it to the game manager. There's a lot of attaching of things there. Let's see if all of my attaching and tags worked. So hit run here. Let's step off the end. Boom. Oh, and there she came back. So half a second, and then she pops right back. All right. See you later.